And some of my students are scrutinizing this report. Now, lo and behold, there are 3 features of this report that I would ask you to keep in mind. It opens with a statement that we subscribe to the universality of rights. And we subscribe to the universality of rights on the basis of what? On the basis of the United Nations Charter, the Universal Declaration, and the internationally recognized ones. In my view, this is an important statement. One of these days when I go through my papers, I will find this Chinese statement of 1977, and I will get somebody to put it on the internet. Today, it's a commitment to universality. So I ask you to keep that in mind. Hong Kong, and when it was a British territory, ratified the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. It has, and other instruments. It has been submitting reports, and it has been engaging in a dialogue with the international human rights treaty bodies. And when China presented this report, it had, under the Universal Periodic Review System, it had parts of this report on Hong Kong and on Macau. And I actually sat in on the discussions, and representatives of Hong Kong and Macau were there in the chamber. Why do I mention this? In some ways, I have the impression there is a French Nobel laureate in literature, André Gide. André Gide says, we should be careful about the person who thinks that he has found the truth. And we should respect the person who is a seeker after the truth. So I know nothing, let us say, about Hong Kong or about China or anything. And so I have not found the truth. I have come here as a seeker after truth. So now, as a seeker after truth, I'm seeing the following. I'm seeing an experience, which is a rule of law experience, a structured system of courts, and a belief that public participation and access to the courts is a way of approaching issues. I'm seeing this experience. And I'm seeing this other experience, which is a journey of 5,000 years, with a lot of convulsions, more than 1 billion people, and I'm seeing the report that is submitted, and it says, we believe in universality, and we have made a lot of strides in economic development, and we have large pockets of poverty still. So when I see the situation here, in my class, I'm telling to my students that a strategic concept in human rights work is the concept of a national protection system, which is what I'm teaching and which is what I will discuss a little bit now. But this is relevant to where we are. They circulated here, well, I'll come back to that, a short paper of mine in which I looked at the jurisprudence and the practice on the right to self-determination and the right to elect and to be elected. Because if I may say so, I think that I will say that a little bit. I think that the situation that you have in mind needs to be approached through the lens of the right to self-determination as well as the right to vote and to be elected. So that's the reason that explains this little paper of mine that one of your assistants put me under pressure to produce. And I came in here last Sunday, I brought in books, and I researched it, because I said they may throw trick questions at me. And so, anyhow, the concept of the national protection system. The first thing that I must say to you about the concept of the national protection system is that the concept of the national protection system must be in accordance with international human rights norms. Because a member state of the United Nations subscribes to the Charter of the United Nations, subscribes to the Universal Declaration, subscribes to other international instruments, and it says, we believe in the universality of human rights, and so we want to walk this journey of human rights. So I ask you to hold in your mind's eye this thought. We want to walk this journey of human rights. Hong Kong has walked some of this journey, and the People's Republic of China has walked some of this journey. And so now you have, it's as if in the one state, two systems, you have two paths that are proceeding in parallel. And I will want to ask you to keep in mind the concept of convergence. The concept of convergence on the basis of the international human rights norms. It's not convergence that is empty. It is not convergence that is devoid of human rights content. It has to be convergence on the basis of the international human rights norms. And keeping in mind the concept of convergence, I would already ask you to keep in mind the concept of autonomy, which you have here. Allow me to say so that I have done much work in different in political parts and in questions and situations of conflict and whatnot. In many situations, like that of the Sudan and the conflict between the North and the South, in 1972 they signed an accord which provided for a large measure of autonomy. There are books on this, so that this concept of autonomy is a strategic concept. And so I have the feeling that without going too far in pronouncing on the debate that is in this country, that it would be of greater importance to focus on preserving the concept of autonomy and giving the concept of autonomy content over a period of time, because this is the concept that is of crucial significance. So far I've asked you to keep in mind the concept of a national protection system, which I will come back to. I've asked you to keep in mind the concept of convergence, and I've asked you to keep in mind the concept of autonomy, and now I will place before you a fourth concept, the concept of self-determination. Now let me backtrack and go to the concept of a national protection system, keeping in mind the concept of convergence. The nation, and all parts of the nation, must walk a journey towards an adequate and effective national protection system. And the nation must be asking itself 6 questions. Is our constitutional order sufficiently in conformity with international human rights norms? Because if you subscribe to human rights norms internationally, you should seek to bring it into your constitutional order. Secondly, is the legislation of the country or its parts reflective of international human rights norms? The society has to be scrutinizing itself as it answers these questions. Third question, can the courts inside the country draw upon, invoke, use international human rights norms, either as enacted in legislation within the country or as parts of international human rights law? Fourth question, is there an institution or are there institutions such as a National Human Rights Commission inside the country? This is my fourth question. I'll digress for a moment. There are some of these institutions in existence in many parts of the world, and some of them are good and some of them are shams. And so so I don't want you to come back and say to me, well, this is nonsense what you're talking about, this National Commission. I put it before you. But that's not the point. The point is that if you start someplace, you can hopefully make it into something meaningful. When I was the High Commissioner for Human Rights, I went to Central Asia. And I visited national human rights institutions in some of the Central Asian countries. They had just begun, and a young officer who was accompanying me said, this is not serious, you shouldn't meet these people. They're all government appointees, etc. Let's get the hell out of here. But for me, slightly hopefully wiser, it didn't matter that they were government shams. On a scale of 1 to 10, if they were at 0 and I could take them to 2, we have made progress. And so this, the concept of a National Human Rights Commission, let me go out on a limb here. I have the distinct impression that this could be a helpful idea in the country at large and in the particular parts as well. Because what it means is that a society is committing itself to methodically acting for the promotion and protection of human rights in the future. The fifth question, the fifth component of a National Human Rights Commission is the society providing human rights education in schools and universities? I spent 3.5 years in the Yugoslav peace negotiations, in the midst of war. I've been to war in Ivory Coast. When I went to the Ivory Coast in the midst of the war, I flew to the northern city of Bouaké in Ivory Coast, and the young rebel leader said to me, speaking in French, "Ici on lutte pour le respect." We're fighting for respect, because those people in the south, they see us as country dwellers, and they're city dwellers, and they don't really respect us.